And we turn now to breaking news out of Hollywood, where the loss of a music legend is being felt.
Late tonight, we got the official word Tom Petty passed away at the age of 66.
It was October 2nd, 2017,
with a unique style and poignant lyrics.
Tom Petty has passed away.
Music lovers around the world were stunned. Petty had been seen in concert just days earlier at the Hollywood Bowl in Los Angeles. It was the final stop in a triumphant tour of North America.
Well, she was an American girl, raised on promises.
Handheld recordings of that last performance soon swept the internet. A glimpse for fans far and wide. The last public moments of a legend.
I think Tom Petty was the rock and roll fan that became a rock star. You can hear a lot of the Beatles, the Stones, the Byrds, and everything he did right through his career.
He had this ability to tap into like the fundamentals of US rock.
When you look back on the body of his work, you really do get a portrait of an artist who really comes to you with a fully realised vision.
Learning to fly, but I ain't got wings. Coming down is the hardest thing.
And there was a great honesty to his work. He was always pushing forward.
In a kind of sea of manufactured pop acts, he was the real deal. He had real authenticity.
Petty's career at the top of music lasted almost half a century. He sold more than 80 million records worldwide and played in front of crowds of thousands. But his success was not overnight. His first band, Mudcrutch, found little success beyond his hometown of Gainesville, Florida. That early failure did not dissuade Petty. He had wanted to be a rock and roll star since childhood.
The really big influence on Tom Petty, as it was for so many young kids in America at the time, was seeing the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show.
And then, of course, there's the influence of Elvis, you know, this amazing moment he has as an 11-year-old child where he gets to meet Elvis on a film set, which must have been incredible. And, you know, he talked about how he almost glowed and he realised, you know, well, being a rock star, that seems like quite a good job to do. I think I'll give it a go. He
also went to see the Rolling Stones. And I think you can see those three pivotal elements, and that's essentially what made Tom Petty. And he never really strayed too far away from that essential template.
Petty was nothing if not tenacious. In 1977, he and two other members of Mudcrutch formed a new group, the Heartbreakers.
Baby, break down, go ahead, give it to me.
The band, with much the same lineup, played together for the next 4 decades.
Break down, now it's standing here, can you see? Break down, it's all right.
Tom's relationship with the Heartbreakers was one of those very typical music business relationships. We're all best buddies, you know, we all live in the same house together. But in fact, Tom was the leader.
Although he is the frontman of the band, his name is on the door of the band, it seems that he's not entirely comfortable with being a solo artist. I think he likes to surround himself with those great musicians and have those writing collaborations.
They really, really worked as a band. If you went to see them, they're very, very tight. And it was just a great rock band.
It was far from a smooth ride to the top. The band's first 2 albums found success in Britain, but in America they sank with barely a ripple. Petty was almost bankrupt by the time the Heartbreakers released their 3rd album in 1979.
Don't do me like that, don't do me like that. Well, I love you, baby, don't do me like that.
Damn the Torpedoes, which went to #2 in the US charts, was the first album that really connected on a national level. And if you listen to it, it's not actually that different from what came before, but it's a distillation. And he'd really learnt the craft of songwriting. It had this kind of clean production, but at the same time, the song's very simple. And I think that's really why it connected.
10 more albums would follow, and countless sellout tours. Petty became a wealthy man, but he never lost sight of what was most important to him in the music. He would fight the creeping commercialism of the industry at every turn.
Tom was one of those exemplars in the history of music, you know, the guy who speaks truth to power. He wrote songs as meaningful as the Beatles, often filled with allegory, symbols, kind of stuff that Dylan would indulge in. And a lot of it in terms of being an artist and wanting to say something about the world that isn't necessarily going to play well on the radio.
Partners. He was close friends with Fleetwood Mac singer Stevie Nicks. A duet between the pair was a highlight of the Heartbreakers' fourth album, Hard Promises. Petty also donated a song to Nicks, which would become her debut solo single.
So you had a little trouble in town. Now you're keeping some demon down. Stop dragging my heart around.
Tom Petty worked with a lot of really great musicians, and I think what it tells us about him was that he's very well liked, he's very, very professional, and also he's a perfectionist. Those songs appear to be fairly effortless, but he was a famous perfectionist in the studio. You know, he'd do 100 takes until he got it right. So I think that was something that gave him a lot of respect within the musical community.
In the late 80s, Petty joined George Harrison, Bob Dylan, Jeff Lynne and Roy Orbison in supergroup the Traveling Wilburys.
Well, it's all right. Riding around in the breeze. Well, it's all right. If you live the life you please. Well, it's all right.
I don't think you can think of a bigger supergroup. It's just, you know, at the time, the biggest living legends in music.
Tom was a welcome addition, and you can really feel his full impact on that Wilburys record.
Wait for the phone to ring. Waiting for someone to tell you everything.
What it proved was that he was held in very, very high regard by his fellow musicians. Especially to have someone like Bob Dylan, who doesn't give out compliments lightly and doesn't really collaborate with that many people. You know, that he wanted to work with Tom Petty.
She's a good girl, loves her mama, loves Jesus, in America too. She's a
Alongside working with this lineup of legends, Petty was also recording his first solo album, which included performances from most of the Heartbreakers and the Traveling Wilburys.
Tom was huge in America. He never really made it in Britain and Europe to the same extent. I think he had that itch to prove himself. Now was the time for him to say, Tom, you know, from the Wilburys, from the Heartbreakers, here's his solo album.
Other collaborations or solo success, Petty returned to the Heartbreakers again and again. He continued to tour and release albums with the band throughout the 90s and into the new millennium. In 2008, this American superstar played an American institution, the Super Bowl. On their 40th anniversary tour. In 53 shows, they rattled across
Tom Petty was huge. We almost didn't realise how big he was. You know, you have songs like Free Falling, American Girl, Went Back Down. They sort of become staples. And he was almost one of these guys that you could take for granted. He'd built up this whole catalogue of great songs that had just become part of the American canon.
And we turn now to breaking news out of Hollywood, where the loss of a music legend is being felt.
Rock legend Tom Petty is being remembered today by fans all around the world.
The confirmation came late in the evening. After being found unconscious at home on the morning of October 2nd, 2017, Tom Petty had been rushed to UCLA Medical Center in Santa Monica. Despite the efforts of doctors there, he died shortly before 9 p.m.
I just thought, this is really strange. You know, this is not someone you would have expected. It wasn't like so many other rock stars of kind of similar vintage who you thought, well, you know, they really lived the life.
Tom Petty didn't seem old enough to be going so soon, and not young enough to be stupid about drugs.
At the time of his death, I don't think people really were aware of the health problems that Tom Petty had been suffering with. In fact, he'd only very recently wrapped up a 40th anniversary tour, which was huge, had taken him all over the world. But it turned out he'd also been dealing with a hip fracture during this tour and had been on painkillers for that.
It's time to move on. It's time to get going. What lies ahead, I have no way of knowing.
Those who had seen him play just days earlier could never have guessed that Petty was battling through pain just to make it on stage.
He was not a well man. He had a fractured hip, which steadily got worse as the tour continued. He was suffering from emphysema from all his years of smoking. He's taking a lot of pain pills. He's taking sleeping pills. He's taking antidepressants.
A man in his 60s should have taken it easier, but it's this combination of kind of keeping the show on the road and getting older. Doctors have been prescribing this whole cocktail of pharmaceutical drugs. I mean, they were opioids of various shapes and forms, and it killed him.
Petty's death came at a dark time for music lovers. The previous evening, a gunman had opened fire on a music festival in Las Vegas. 58 innocent musicgoers were killed in what was the deadliest mass shooting in American history. For so many, Petty's songs have been a comfort in hard times. Now, grief is piled on grief. Fans gathered at the Star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Tributes poured in. Musicians of every genre and generation mourned the passing of an American legend. On the night after Petty died, Bruce Springsteen dedicated his show to him. He was not the only one. Coldplay, The Killers, U2, and the Red Hot Chili Peppers, they all paid tribute in their sets.
What I realised when he died was how loved he was and how respected within the musical world he was.
I think it's clear to see that Tom Petty was a musician's musician. He was really well respected by his peers, by his contemporaries, by people who came before and after.
Born in distant Florida, Petty was laid to rest in California.
California's been good to me. Hope it don't fall into the sea.
It was the state he had made his home, the state which had shaped his music. Petty shaped American music in return.
I think Tom Petty's impact on music is huge. I think, you know, he has almost kind of added to the Great American Songbook.
You can hear Last Night by The Strokes and realise that it's essentially American Girl. You can listen to anything by the Kings of Leon and realise that they've taken a hell of a lot of influence from him. But also, you know, other modern bands like Vampire Weekend. On a kind of bigger level, there's the whole genre of Americana. Tom Petty is almost the perfect example of that because, you know, that he takes little elements of country and blues, but essentially he's a rock and roller. He kind of showed that you could have this dirt under your fingernails approach to music and still be huge.
One of my favourites is when Dave Grohl was invited to play with the Heartbreakers on a US TV show.
Dave played in the Heartbreakers after Stan Lynch left in 1994, same year that Kurt Cobain sadly committed suicide. So Dave suddenly is without a band, in a bad place, and Tom calls him and says, we're doing Saturday Night Live, do you want to come and play drums? And he did, and it was amazing. And after that, they offered Dave the job, come and be the drummer in the Heartbreakers, and he nearly took it.
At his best, Tom Petty infused the purest pop rock with something deeper. His weathered rasp of a voice spoke with experience of struggle and yearning, of love and loss.
Well, let me get to the point. Let's roll another joint and turn the radio loud. I'm too alone to be proud, and you don't know how it feels. You don't know how it feels to be me.
I think the one thing about Tom Petty that made him so unique was his ability to tell a story wrapped up in a 3-minute pop rock song, and that is harder than it sounds. And you know, those beautiful lyrics, the way he wrote, the way he connected with his audience, that I think is the thing that gives him that legacy.
Petty lived out the rock star fantasies of millions, but he never forgot what he'd been before, a fan. As a teenager in Florida, he would spend hours listening to the radio, waiting for that one song to play again, daydreaming about the lives of his idols. He carried that outsider mentality with him throughout his decade at the top, and drove him on.
When I think of Tom Petty, I really think of tenacity. I think he didn't really change his sound. He stuck to it, he honed it and crafted it. But he clearly knew what he wanted to do.
Tom, early on in his career, had a major run-in. His original label, Shelter, sold Tom's contract to MCA without talking to him about it, no consultation, no renegotiation of the contract. So Petty financed the recording of his next album, which meant that the record company couldn't say they'd paid for it and therefore they owned it. And then he sat on it, wouldn't give it to them. MCA then came to him with a brand new contract.
I think Tom Petty was a kind of a staunch guardian of his artistic creativity, and he wasn't going to let anyone mess with that, least of all his record label.
They were going to put out Hard Promises for $9.99, which at that time was $1 more than most LPs. He went to war. He refused to release the album until they either reduced the price back to $8.99 or they went to court, and MCA backed down.
Tom Petty was the musician's musician. He was happiest on the road or in the studio. He was still writing songs in his Malibu home just hours before his death. In an industry so often famed for the tantrums and extravagance of its stars, here was a different man, a decent man, and above all, until the very end, a music man.
I think you could definitely describe Tom Petty as the quintessential American rock star. You know, partly because if you look at just his album sales, you know, it's one of the biggest selling American rock artists of all time, but also what he did in terms of bringing American rock back to the forefront of music. He really inspired new generations. He really pulled those kind of influences from the past, from rock and roll and rockabilly, also that kind of idea of the 3-minute perfect pop song, and pushed it into the future and kind of kept that vein of music running, and he set that blueprint up for future generations.
Into the great wide open, under them skies of blue, out in the great wide open, a rebel without a clue.
Tom Petty did become the quintessential Americana rock star. He just felt like a music fan. That's how it seemed to me. You know, it seemed like this is a guy that really grew up on great records.
Tom Petty's legacy is very much about the body of work. Anybody coming to his catalogue for the first time, pick any album. It's gonna be great, you're gonna love it, and you'll find stuff you never knew existed. You'll find gold.
You and I will meet again when we're least expecting it. Somewhere in some far-off place, I will recognize your face. I will